Hey everyone, we're back in conversation with some of the guys from Forefront Sims. I'm Steven, but Cliff and Tyler, if you guys want to give a little bit of an intro for yourselves, I think we'll get straight into the questions right after that.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Stephen. I'm Cliff Stevens with Forefront Sims, founded the company about 2.5 years ago. Forefront is a custom, high-end design and build firm, right? So we design and build golf simulators for our clients, residentially and commercially, in basements, garages, golf sheds, all sorts of things. So I run the company. Tyler joined our team almost a year ago, maybe. He's helping grow markets, helping with sales, technology, all of that kind of stuff, automation, AI, kind of our guru from that perspective as well.
Awesome. Well, today I think we're just going to kind of shoot through some questions that I know a lot of people have, specifically regarding premium installer evaluation and vendor comparisons. So obviously you guys are operating where you are, but if somebody's maybe outside of that, or could use some help evaluating who they're maybe looking to hire as an installer, I think a lot of these questions are going to be helpful for that.
Yep.
So going into the first one, what should buyers look for when they're hiring a golf simulator installation company?
I mean, I would say the most important thing is somebody that's done it before many times and with quality, right? Just like any construction project, does this person know what they're doing, or this company know what they're doing? Have they done it before? Can they deliver, on budget, on time, with good quality? Do they take care of their customers? So I'd say that's probably the most important thing from my perspective.
Mhm.
It's fair to ask those questions to your installer, right? How many of these have you done? Can I talk to customers? Look at the reviews online, but we love it when a client says, "Hey, can you put me in touch with a couple of customers? We'll give you a list of 20 or 30 customers and say, hey, have at it, call them, ask them any questions you want." So I mean, to me, that's kind of the basics. I would then say, do they have their own crews? Right? Are they just subbing this out to a long list of subs and they don't have any kind of control over quality or consistency? Our crews are our crews. We've got dedicated people that all they do all day, every day is build golf simulators. And some of those people have been with us for multiple years and built hundreds of simulators. So are they an expert? Do they have experience? Can they deliver with quality? Do they have happy customers? Maybe one other aspect before I flip it to Tyler would be, are they beholden to a particular brand or product, right? We are technology agnostic. We will deliver the right technology, the right solution for your needs and your budget. There are vendors out there that only work with one brand, right? And that's, they are stuck with that brand, and that's what you're going to get if you go work with them. And I think it's important to be able to pick from the best thing that's available on the market and that's going to meet your needs. So, Tyler, anything else there?
Just echoing off of Cliff, I think looking for companies who are regularly posting and updating their installations and showcasing their work. I know in our particular case, we've got a social page, particular in Instagram, where we are regularly posting in progress work, new builds that are going out. Certainly on our website, we also have a variety of different builds with different scenarios that we put out there as well too. So just gets back to a lot of things Cliff was saying, looking for somebody who has done this work consistently and is, creating very happy clients from the work that they're delivering and showcasing and, wanting to showcase that work. So that goes a long way in helping to evaluate some of the other things Cliff mentioned, of making sure that there's crew members that know what they're doing, they've done this a few times, or if they're growing crews, they've got people supervising and giving all the feedback and growing that experience. So, those are a lot of the key considerations.
Yep.
Yeah. So kind of honestly digging into that a little bit deeper, even, how do you evaluate a golf simulator installer that you're looking to hire?
Yeah, I'll jump into that one, and I'll extend it to also golf simulator installers that focus on more of the design and build aspects like we do. It's one of those things when you talk about custom builds, there's always going to be some new frontier. So I think being able to explain to your client, how we have done a variety of different things, whether it's different accents on the walls, customize our padding with embroidery or different fabrics, handling different flooring situations or impediments in the ceilings, like working around soffits, or Cliff has mentioned in some of our other conversations how we've created hidden doors and other things so we could still use the room and the orientation that made the most sense, but make the house usable or give some additional storage space. So I think, there's a difference between somebody who's just an installer who's just going to sort of set up, a DIY kit and kind of put that into your space like you might get online, versus an installer that's going to actually be able to build into your space and handle sort of the creative design that you, your spouse, your interior designer may have as well, and being able to show you examples of how they've done those things, or how they can take an idea that you have and turn it into an actual reality, and again showing examples of that. But yeah, Cliff, feel free to give your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered the basics really well. It would just be, I probably sound like a broken record here, but like, show me an example of where you've done this before, right? Tyler and I both came from consulting, way back in the day, and like we called them quals, right? Like, show me examples. What's your portfolio? Where have you done this before? Where have you removed a wall to create more space and built it into a golf simulator? And then there's probably some more kind of technical business oriented questions I would ask as well, right?
Yep.
Are you a licensed general contractor? Can you pull a permit if we need to for this project? Do you have insurance in case something goes wrong on my project, right? Like all those sorts of things that are, the basics. And sometimes when you get a quote from a maybe a more fly by night type operation, they're not going to be able to answer yes to a lot of those questions. So that would be very important for me if I'm inviting somebody into my home to do work. You can answer. Yeah. If you can't answer yes to those questions, you probably shouldn't be working with that company.
No, I mean, that makes total sense. I think sometimes I think in this specific regard of people's hobbies and passions, they start to look past those things. Yeah. And I'm glad that you guys bring them up, because it is obviously a very important detail. So going on to the next, almost even a deeper dive on that. What questions should you ask before you're hiring a golf simulator contractor?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, we just covered a few of them, right? Who's going to be doing the work? Do they have experience with doing golf simulators, right? It's sort of the are you subbing all the work out to whoever's going to show up to do the work that day? The licensing, the insurance type questions, all that sort of stuff is super important. I think another one that's really important is what am I getting, right? Sometimes I'll see if we're going head to head bidding against another golf simulator company, the proposal can be very generic, right? We will build an enclosure. Well, what does that mean, right? At the end of the day, what am I getting, right? That could be a $200 tent-like structure that is purchased online and assembled in 5 minutes versus the high-end custom enclosure that we build. And I hate even calling it an enclosure, right? Because it's not. It is a custom golf simulator, right? But I'll see just very generic wording without any kind of visuals to back it up. And as a customer, I want to know, what am I getting, right? And I've experienced this in custom home building where you're signing up for a full build and it's like, yeah, you're going to get granite countertops. Well, there's wildly different costs and value of what I can get from a granite countertop. And same thing with a golf simulator, right? Am I getting a erector set like enclosure that's very thin fabric on the outside, or am I getting a custom build where I can pick my materials and make it look like it's part of my home? To me, that's the most important thing, right? What am I getting? You have sort of the business basics that we talked about. Have you done this before? Can you give me a referral to talk to of somebody that's doing a similar build or did a similar build as what I'm going to do? What am I getting for it? And then you get into things like timeline and budget. Is this a fixed bid? Like, what will change the cost of this? In what scenario will I end up paying more or not? And that's important to know. How long is it going to take, right? When can you start and how long will it take? When will you be in and out of my house? And then I go into probably, again, not to be too commercially for us, but like, we pride ourselves on handing a golf simulator to a customer that is going to be a seamless, fun experience and they're not frustrated with. So are you going to configure everything for me? Are you going to teach me how to use it? are you going to support me afterwards when I'm learning how to use it? Because there is a little bit of I'd say there's probably a 1 to 2 week break-in period where people are still learning how to open the software and get into the right places and use it how they want. Are you going to support me? Right? I answer my cell phone all the time with customers that say, "Hey, my buddies are here. What program do I open again? Oh yeah, click that. We'll remote it and get you going. Now you're playing with your buddies and you're not frustrated, right?" So sorry, I talked forever on that, Tyler. I don't.
Well, no, I think you covered the biggest one that I was thinking through, Cliff. I mean, everything you said was important, but it's really what is that handoff experience, that immediate support, and also ongoing support. I know in our case, we offer ongoing support and maintenance plans for customers that maybe need additional support over time, or they want to come through and have some things refreshed over time on more of the consumable components of their simulator. So being a company or an installer that's able to support that over time, and potentially remote into clients' computers to help them walk through something, or as I mentioned, come through and help refresh the simulator every couple of years when some of the more consumable items have worn down. Those are the key pieces, right? It's not just sort of a fly-by-night type installer. They'll come and maybe throw something up and then they're gone. Having a company that's a bit more established and has the ability to support over time is, I think, another key consideration outside of all those things that you had mentioned previously.
One last quick question would be, what are my licensing costs, right? Different technology solutions have different ongoing licensing costs, and that's important as a part of the overall cost of ownership for a golf simulator to know. And they're not staggering costs, but you'll probably pay somewhere in the $10 to $40 a month range for the launch monitor licensing and the golf simulator software licensing. So those are, again, important questions to ask. So you just you go into this decision knowing your costs from an ongoing basis perspective.
Yeah, I love that, because that's something that, again, I mean, we've had this come up in previous conversations, but again, I would have never thought to even ask about, and I even in asking it just from our previous conversations, I was hoping to get something about even like the change order kind of aspect that you guys brought up, and a couple of the other things that I think both you guys, Tyler and Cliff, brought up. But I think it's helpful to just even have at the front of the mind when you're thinking about creating a series of questions that are going to be asked directly to an installer of this nature. So kind of even going further past that, what should be included in a professional golf simulator installation proposal?
Yeah, I'll give that a start, Cliff, and then feel free to jump in. But Cliff covered a lot of these things. I think it's important to know, overall, what are you getting from this installation? So, there's a mixture of just the overall technology and components, right? What kind of launch monitor, projector, the putting turf, the framing, the custom padding in our particular case. Like, those are important things to know. Just some examples we've seen when we've been compared against proposals is, like, let's say the type of projector you use. Like, we use pretty high quality projectors that are well regarded within simulator space, very well tested in the simulator space. But you might have another installer who is offering a projector that on paper looks like the right specs, but ultimately maybe it's got less lumens, or it's overall lower quality, or it's less ideal for a golf simulator space. So I think one aspect is just what I mentioned, all things about the technology and components, like what are you actually getting there? Why are they important for the type of space and setup that you're looking for? And then the other piece is some of the other things that we've talked about in prior client questions around just knowing that we're going to come through, if we need to go into your walls, which is typical to do the electrical, the low voltage, knowing that we're going to come and patch and paint those things back up so it looks like nothing ever happened. The handover, the calibration and setup of your equipment, the training aspects of it. So just knowing that you're getting, especially if somebody's saying they're going to give you a turnkey experience, the design and build aspects of it, making sure you're actually getting all those pieces with premium components that'll go into your space. I think those are some of the simple things to make sure you have an understanding versus I think as Cliff gave the example before of just like, we're going to build you a golf sim and there's a price. So
Yeah.
I think having at least a little bit of detail about what that really means is an important piece, so you really know what you're getting there. But Cliff, feel free to add some things to that.
I think that's all of it. Just on the knowing what you're getting piece, we'll show up with samples of the materials we're going to build your custom pads out of, so you can see it and touch it and feel it. So really digging in on that. What am I getting? We have an in-house design team with a 3D designer, so we can create a robust 3D rendering of what you're going to get down to the materials. You can see ahead of time what you're getting. I also love that because it shows our crews what to build, and they have a vision. They don't have to envision in their head. They know what we're building, and then they just go do it. So if you can't get a good visual representation of what you're building, I would steer clear, right? You need to know what you're getting. You need to be informed. So yeah, I'd say if you can't get samples of the materials and touch and feel it, or see a 3D rendering of what you're going to get, I would be cautious.
Yeah, and I feel like so much of what I'm hearing is realistically, with at least with you guys and people like you, but specifically your firm, you're buying peace of mind. It sounds like you're buying a knowing that it's going to be a product that people actually want rather than a guess.
Yep.
So going on to the next question here. How do you compare a local golf simulator design build company versus a national equipment provider?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we see in this space a lot. So, not to disparage anybody at all, but it's just they're different models, right? The local provider, and especially Forefront, we are going to be we hold your hand. It is turnkey. You point and tell us what you want, and we make it happen, and you show up and play golf and have fun. Typically, the national equipment providers, they have networks of installers that they partner with. And typically they're flying them in, they're shipping equipment in. And typically there's going to be a lot of prerequisites working with those companies, right? So they'll say, hey, we're handling these aspects, and you need to find an electrician, you need to find a framer, you need to find a drywall person, you need to find a flooring person, right? And so they're doing a very defined scope. And so at times it can seem very reasonably priced. But, again, I go back to kind of the underestimation of the amount of work and coordination that has to happen to make all these things come together. So, again, as a customer, you're having to find the electrician, you're having to find the carpenter, you're having to find the drywall person and the painter. So it sort of puts a lot more of the coordination and effort and almost the GC, the general contracting aspect of the job, on the customer, right?
Yeah.
So they're very different models. One is more turnkey, one is more, like make your life easy as a customer. And the other, typically there's going to be a lot more kind of coordination and headache on the customer. And I would just push customers to really understand what's my final cost going to be, right? Because, I don't know, I'm making up numbers. Maybe our proposal is $60,000 for a turnkey golf simulator in your house. And maybe you see a $40,000 proposal from a national provider. Seems like a no-brainer, but you don't know what your electrical cost is going to be. You might spend $3,000 on an electrician to come in. You might spend $5,000 for a framer. You might spend $4,000 for a drywall guy, and then $2,000 for a painter. And then all of a sudden you're paying more and you're having to do more work, right? So really understanding your total cost would be super important in assessing across those two models. Tyler, what did I miss there?
Nothing. I just add on that national equipment provider. You brought up the example of, typically they will offer some sort of installation service on top of the package cost. But even if you don't go with the installation service and you just get the equipment and it shows up on a pallet, it gets back to some of the things we've said before. Okay, now you are in the DIY space and you've got to think through all these things of where does my projector go? How do I hide the wires safely back in the walls, and then I got to patch and paint it myself. Otherwise, I've got to put some sort of cover on the walls, and it just doesn't look overall as probably what they originally intended it to look like when they saw it in maybe like a virtual rendering or something like that. or on the website. So it just gets back to exactly what you said, right? It's two different models. One, things show up to your door. There's a lot more, whether you're DIYing it or working with their national installer, there's a lot more on you to make sure you've done those things in advance. You've accounted for those costs separate from purchasing the equipment and the package versus with the professional installer, particularly someone like Forefront, doing the entire turnkey design, build, all those aspects handled for you. So all you have to show up with is a club and a ball.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point that you guys both brought up in different ways. But your time, really, I know that I've decided to go through that with my own home, where I've basically been the general contractor, where I hire out this person and I hire out that person. I find the electrician and I find the plumber and this and that. And it ends up always being so much more time than you ever think it's going to be. And for, I think, a lot of these people that are likely your clients, as well as other people who are even looking for these golf simulators, I think your time is one of the most valuable aspects of this entire process.
Yep.
Going further here, what are the risks of hiring separate vendors for simulator equipment, construction, and installation?
I'll take a stab at this. I think the biggest potential risk, and I'll try to break it up in different considerations. If you're talking about sort of like three different categories here, the equipment, construction, and then actually I'll call it more like the technology component, simulator specific pieces. I think one risk is just having somebody who manages all those pieces, right? Again, let's go back to this idea that you're going to go the national equipment provider route. You're going to buy the equipment, and then maybe you're going to work through their installer. Maybe you're going to work through your own GC to do some of this work. Now you as the homeowner, the client, you're responsible for factoring in all those pieces. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time. I think another consideration, let's assume you're just going with one golf simulator installer. One of the risks if they're working with different equipment is you want to know that they have that experience installing particularly different types of projectors or different types of launch monitors. Like in the case of Forefront, we've worked with every single major launch monitor manufacturer in the space, and we continue to evaluate new players that come into the market to see if they're another good fit for our clients in certain scenarios. And so, at least having an installer, a golf simulator expert who has had experience with different types of simulator softwares, different types of launch monitors is a key piece, because while you would generally think they're all the same, it's all golf simulation, everyone has different software. Certain launch monitor manufacturers work with other software as well, and others not so well. So there's just a lot of experience in that space of knowing what things work well together, what things you have to work around, or maybe they don't work well together, and just having that experience, and again continuing to understand what's new in the space as well too, because it's such a hot growing space. There's always seems to be a new player on the market that might have something interesting and compelling, and evaluating whether or not that's a good fit for clients now, or maybe in a couple of years it'll be a great option as that company continues to mature.
I would just say the coordination across all of those vendors would be the biggest risk. And like we said before, there's a lot of interdependency in the technology and the construction, right? They have to go hand in hand, and you change something on the technology side, it impacts the construction side. So, hiring all those different vendors, they're there to do a job, right? They're there to frame, they're there to put in drywall, and they're not talking to the other vendors, right? And so we handle all of that coordination for our clients that now we know how to do because of years of experience. And a client's not going to, the end customer's not going to know how to do that. They're not going to know that if they change their projector, that changes where it's placed on the ceiling, and now they need their electrical and their low voltage moved to another location, right? So it's really that, to me, the biggest thing is the coordination amongst all those things. And then, aside from risk, I would just say the frustration of it all, right? Our customers want this to be a fun, enjoyable experience. And if you got super frustrated in the process, it's going to jade your experience a little bit, right? Like,
Yeah.
You know, so now you're at your simulator and you just spent months coordinating with all this frustration, and you're now in a room and it's like, man, this is frustrating, right? We want it to be fun and enjoyable, right? And so that's why we like to abstract a lot of that pain for our customers.
Going on to the next question here. How can buyers tell whether a golf simulator quote is complete or if it's missing important costs?
It's a great question, and it's really hard to answer, honestly, because there's so many components that go into a golf simulator and the proposal. We like to keep our proposals fairly simple, right? We don't list every single item, right? I don't list every HDMI cable and every projector mount and every TV mount and the bungees that the screen attaches to the wall with. So, if you're talking about sort of a local golf simulator installer, I would just ask the simple question of like, and get it in writing of like, what do I need to provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to go play golf at the end of the day when you're finished with your job, what is the consumer do I need to provide? And if they say much other than golf clubs and golf balls, you're missing something. And again, I'd get it in writing, right? What as a consumer do I need to provide to make this thing functional? But it would just be one, I'd do some Googling, right? What are the most important components of a golf simulator, right? Your launch monitor, projector, your gaming computer. Is my gaming computer going to be spec'd to support the right level of resolution that we're going to be, trying to achieve in the graphics quality? The software, is that part of the deal, or am I, paying for that with a credit card on my own? And we like customers to do that so that they own the relationship with the vendor. Putting turf, hitting mat, screen, mounting hardware for everything, wiring, golf club storage. Do I need that? Do I want that? So, the most basic answer is just, what do I need to provide as a consumer to make this thing functional and enjoyable, and get it in writing. But then there's, some gut checking that you should do also to be informed. Tyler, jump in there.
Yeah, no, I think exactly what you said, right? It's one of those things where probably the most important piece is the client understanding what do they need to provide to complete the golf simulator. And I know in our case, the answer is essentially nothing other than showing up. But I think that's the most important piece, because that will tell you what's missing. And just like you said, Cliff, the idea that we don't include, like, even though we do include all the bells and whistles in terms of cables and Cat6 and HDMI and all those pieces that are needed, just for simplicity's sake, we don't always include that specifically on the quote as a line by line item. So I'll just go back to what you said of, having the client understand what do they need to bring in order to complete and be able to actually leverage and utilize their simulator. That's a key, probably the simplest question to ask to understand what could be potentially missing in that quote.
Yep, right on.
So what experience matters most when you're choosing a golf simulation installer for a commercial project?
Yeah, I'll jump into this one because I get involved with a lot of our commercial projects. Ultimately, just the nature of a commercial project, whether it's helping a client build their own commercial simulator business where they've got membership, or you pay for time to use the simulators, or in other scenarios where it might be inside of a college, a university for their golf team, or as part of an office building, maybe for a lawyer's office for an entertainment space. There are just a variety of more logistics and teams to work with in those situations. And so having an installer that's worked with larger GCs, maybe worked with an architect, has the insurance coverage needed for those types of commercial builds, and the licensing involved that's required as well. Typically, it's a lot of being able to play nicely and work well together with all these other groups. So it's not just, in a residential situation, it's typically, we're usually working with the client. We're kind of handling all those aspects. In a commercial project setting, it is working with, as I mentioned before, GCs, facilities teams, architects, and the client, along with any other subs that maybe the GC is using in addition to our own crew. So it's having that experience to work in those situations and there are a variety of levels of commercial projects. Like I said, sometimes if you're doing, a commercial simulator business and maybe like a smaller strip mall space, that's a different experience than working again in something like a larger university or commercial office building, and sort of the level of architect or builder that you're working with in those situations. So it's
Mhm.
it's back to what I think we've said in a lot of places, being able to tell your clients, we have done this work. Here are a variety of examples, not only just showing them pictures, but here's how we worked with those other groups and all the other basic business requirements of things like insurance, licensing, understanding things related to occupancy and the flow of traffic, and ADA compliance is very big in the
Yep.
commercial space as well
Yeah.
too. So there are so many more factors to consider when doing commercial projects that you really need somebody who has been there and done that to have a seamless experience. They're not just sort of figuring that out on the fly. And the biggest impact to you as a potential client in there is if the installer starts to delay things, then that causes a waterfall trickle down effect for everything else, and then all of a sudden your entire project gets pushed out. So Cliff, feel free to add some other pieces there, but ultimately there are more logistics, more players,
Yep.
and more regulations in the commercial space. So having somebody who's got experience with those, knows how to handle them, ideally knows how to handle them, again, at sort of different levels of those complexities as you get to larger and larger commercial projects,
Yep.
are very key.
I think you nailed it. Yeah, the level of coordination has increased. So Tyler's done a great job of building out infrastructure for us with coordination documents, right? Who owns what? Does the GC own the scope? Does Forefront own the scope? Knowing that, setting expectations beforehand, and all the coordination is super important. The only other thing I'd add is, having some level of project management and coordination, a dedicated person or team that's going to handle that for you. In a commercial setting, you're going to need more of that, right? So those sorts of questions are super important.
That makes total sense. I think when we're talking about residential versus commercial, I'm glad that we're getting into a little bit of the commercial aspect of these things, because we've talked so much about the residential so far. So going on to the next question here. What experience matters most when you're choosing an installer specifically for a luxury home installation?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to a lot of what we talked about. I might just add, similar to what we just talked about on the commercial side.
Mhm.
Hey, how are you going to coordinate with my interior designer or my decorator or my builder or my GC, right? So we work with those groups all the time. We're really good at playing nice with them and consulting them on the front end. Nothing's going to upset a luxury home build more than a golf simulator installer coming in and just throwing a standard golf simulator into, a $1.5 or $2 million or $3 or $5 million house.
Yeah.
And the designer's like, whoa, this doesn't match our design aesthetic. This doesn't, flow with the look and feel of the house, and the materials don't match, right? So, I think that's when you start talking really luxury, you've got to be able to play nice, again, with multiple stakeholders. And that could be, again, designers, the general contractor. They're going to have an audio-visual person doing a lot of low voltage. And I think an important question to ask there is, who owns the scope? And we're the first to say, hey, we'll hand that scope over to the builder, the designer, the architect, right? And if you've got somebody there doing framing and drywall, it makes sense for them to own that for you, right? We're not going to be selfish and say, hey, we need to own all that scope because we want added revenue or whatever, right? We're going to do what's best for the client. Similar with AV, right? If you've got an audiovisual person running TVs and speakers all throughout your house, they should handle that in your sim room too. And we just connect in with them. And now you could say, hey, Alexa, turn on the golf simulator, and your home automation and all your speakers work in concert with your golf simulator, as opposed to it being a separate entity, right? So I'd say it goes back to some of those central questions we're talking about, is ability to coordinate with multiple groups, play nice, and integrate into kind of a process that's already happening.
Yeah. I think, and a very nice to have on the experience scale, especially for luxury luxury home simulator spaces is having sort of that construction DNA in that space within the company.
Yeah.
I know that's something at Forefront, not only our crews and our co-founder, one of our co-founders has a lot of that prior construction DNA working in high-end homes with renovations, doing framing, electrical, all those types of things. So that I think is a key factor and differentiator on the experience scale is folks who know how to work in that space from a core construction perspective. So they've got all those considerations in mind, in addition to understanding how the golf simulator technology works, what it's like to be a golfer in a simulator. Those are some key experience considerations as well.
One last super quick one I'll add there is just, do I have options, right? What materials can I select from, right? Do I have different options for putting turf colors, wood trim, LED lighting? Can I change the padding you're going to build to be different materials, right? Like a lot of people do black marine grade vinyl to wrap the pads in, but maybe I want to do different colors to match my aesthetic, or I want to do it in a velvet or, a crushed velvet or something, right? So when we're talking luxury, right, do I have options? Can I get really fun and creative with the design? And then can that firm go implement that in an effective way? Would be a very big question I'd ask on a luxury space.
Yeah. I mean, you guys know this more than anyone, but if you're working with an interior designer, that's going to be their first question. I feel like, are there options?
Yep, 100%. What are my options? Exactly. How far can I take this?
Exactly. So going on to the next. So how should buyers compare different golf simulator technology recommendations?
Sure. I'll give some high level considerations. So one is just the nature of the technology capabilities of the launch monitors themselves, and I'll just focus on launch monitors. So, simple things to consider. What ball metrics do they collect and measure? What club metrics do they measure? So that's a simple one, because some folks are very, very keen on very specific metrics, a certain type of spin, or wanting to know their club face coming in. And depending on the launch monitor brand, some offer that, some don't. So that's one consideration. I think another one to that is just the overall ecosystem around those launch monitor brands. So we see more and more companies integrating AI into their software, providing things like AI swing trainers, so you can have regular feedback while you're in the simulator, when you're not necessarily working with your coach. And as part of that, they offer things like swing cameras or balance mats, and that will continue to evolve. So what is the overall sort of ecosystem for that brand? I think related to that, it is how frequently are those brands updating and continuing to sort of push the envelope of what golfers and simulator golfers in particular are looking for, and adding to the overall scope of features that they offer, and how responsive have they been to community feedback. Another piece that's a bit more on the budgetary side, but just what's the subscription model look like? The large majority of launch monitor brands today have moved to a subscription model. Not every single one of them, but that's an ongoing cost or long-term cost type consideration as well too. What's the subscription tier that I need to be at to get the types of features that I want that are outside of just the standard range, or maybe some basic course options. One other one I mentioned is just, again, how well do they interact with other third-party simulator software? So GS Pro is one that we're big fans of as sort of the core golf course simulation software. And most launch monitor manufacturers integrate and work with it. Some don't. So that's, if it's very important for you to be able to do GS Pro or TGC or some of the other third-party simulation softwares out there, it's important to know, does that launch monitor brand work with it? And then maybe the last piece, and we've kind of talked about this before, is just what works for your space. So again, typically we like to focus on ceiling-based and camera-based launch monitors in a lot of our simulator builds, but sometimes it may make more sense to have a floor-based launch monitor, or one that's portable that you can take out to the course and has a battery in it. So those are a lot of the key considerations to kind of come up with almost a matrix of what's going to make the most sense for what our client, the golfer, is typically looking for. There's never there's not usually not a one all be all type option. There's usually two or three that can typically work, and then we can get into some of the nitty gritty of what the client's really looking for and helping them narrow it down to the ideal launch monitor for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think really well said. Maybe highlighting again the swing cameras, right? You mentioned the AI swing trainers. Do you want swing cameras so you can do, all of the launch monitors give you good data about your club and your ball, obviously different levels and different amounts of data that you can get. But do you want to see your swing externally so you can work on the things that your golf coach is teaching you about? I have swing cameras in my simulator, and I get golf lessons in my basement. I schedule them. It's a Zoom call. He can see me, talk to me, give me feedback, see my metrics. So there's things like that you want to think about. And if you think about it on the front end, it makes it easier. Projection is certainly important. We've talked about ambient light, 4K versus 1080p. Those are, can be reasonably big cost drivers. If you have a lot of ambient light, you do want to invest in a higher end projector with higher lumens, right? Pretty standard is 3,000 to 4,000 lumens, but if you want to get up into the 6,000 or 7,000 lumen range, that can support a lot of ambient light. So that's important. And then I would say, do you want other technologies involved? And that's great to plan for on the front end. Like, are we thinking about a multi-sport simulator? Are we thinking about shooting simulators, racing simulators? Like, have we considered that stuff on the front end in our proposal? Because doing it on the front end is way cheaper than having to go back and retrofit it after.
Right.
Yeah, I think those are probably the main pieces to think about.
It really seems like there are so many variables. It almost seems like the short answer of that is any recommendations should be given after you guys actually have a conversation and ask those questions of what they're looking for. If somebody's not asking those questions, then you shouldn't take their recommendation, it sounds like.
I will say our model is very consultative, right? We always start with, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want this to be? What's your vision for this? And then we help you fill in the components and pieces to achieve that. But yeah, if you're designing and building a golf simulator and not having kind of deep conversations about what you want to achieve and what your goals are, you're probably going to miss the boat.
I think that honestly, that kind of leads into one of the next questions, which is, what red flags should buyers watch for in a golf simulator installation quote?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about different pieces of this. So one, specifically in the quote, right? Is it telling you what you're getting, right? Are you getting, things like model numbers? Are you getting specs? I've seen golf simulator quotes that just say 4K projector. Well, there's $150 4K projectors on Amazon, and there's $6,000 high-end golf simulator projectors, and you need to know which one you're getting, right? Your gaming PC, do you have an idea? Are you getting an NVIDIA RTX 5080 with the appropriate RAM spec for your 4K projector, or are you getting something else that's suboptimal and your graphics aren't going to perform like you want, or it's going to be choppy, right? So really, biggest red flag to me, a couple things would be lack of information about what you're getting, lack of specificity, lack of visual understanding and materials of what you're going to get. And then, this sounds silly, but if it sounds too cheap, or if it sounds too good to be true, it might be, right? So we all certainly want to get good value for what we're paying, but sometimes if it's too cheap, there's probably something missing, right? And you're going to pay for it in the long run. And that's as far as quotes. As far as builders, we talked about it. Like, do you have a long list of happy customers? If your golf simulator provider can't provide you a long list of happy customers and references and pictures of their work, I would, recommend to probably steer clear. You don't want somebody just doing this because it sounds cool, or it's their first time doing it as your golf simulator builder. Tyler, anything to miss there?
No, I think just reiterating a key thing that you started off with, which is, just this idea of, I get a little bit hesitant of somebody, maybe an installer that gives you a quote right away without going through some of that consultation process, and ideally at a bare minimum seeing pictures of the space, or if it's a new construction, understanding the floor plan and kind of talking to you about what experience you're looking for. Just getting a quote without having a lot of those initial consult type questions, I would be a little concerned that there's going to be some things missed, and that gets to some of the questions we've talked about. Potentially having hidden costs because they didn't do a lot of the upfront work to understand and factor that in earlier on.
Yep, right on.
Yeah. So going on to our last question for today, why does turnkey project management matter in a custom simulator build?
Yeah, it gets back to all, several of the things we've said before. When you talk about turnkey, I mean, that should really mean, after that initial design consultation and, agreeing on the technologies and the right selections that are recommended, all you have to really worry about is you're getting updates along the way from, in our case, from our project manager and our crews. But from a client perspective, all you should really have to worry about is being able to take a club and go hit and learn how to use the system at the end of our installation. So the key things around the project management piece are us or your installer, again, taking care of all these pieces, getting the electrical done, getting everything installed, making sure the paint and patchwork is done. If we need to work with your interior designer or GC, like, we can handle all those conversations and manage the process and the schedule. And some clients do want to be more involved, and they want to be involved on all the conversations, and we can certainly accommodate that. But for the clients that just want to be, they want to make the selections, they want to have the vision for what it is, and then show up when it's done. That's a key piece where having a project management tied to the actual installation goes a long way. And just on the back end of all this, right, there are a variety of logistics on our end. We are oftentimes building things, especially our custom padding we do in-house. So making sure that's scheduled and ready to go. Sometimes if we don't have equipment in inventory, making sure we've got the right lead time to get the inventory in and have it ready for the project. So project management is so key just to making the overall installation a smooth, hiccup-free process, or at least as much as possible. And so if you've just got maybe a smaller installer where it's a couple of folks and they don't have, they're both doing the installation and managing all those pieces, the likelihood for the ball to get dropped somewhere is much higher than if you've got some dedicated project management around these installations with just all the logistics that are involved.
Yeah, I think back to our very early days as a business before we had the infrastructure of a project manager. We have an inventory manager, right? We would drop those kinds of balls, right? We'd show up to a project and not have the right materials, and then it'd be a 3-week lead time, and then you have a very unhappy customer, right? So being proactive, all that stuff, it goes back to a lot of what we talked about. There's so much coordination that has to happen in one of these builds. Even things like prep work, right? We have a prep team that goes out, and our project manager coordinates that to put down protection on your floors and your stairs and your carpet. And, we don't want to do any damage to a customer's home. So again, coordinating all those little pieces, thinking about them, super important. And that's, that has upped our game in a big way by having that kind of infrastructure. And, we're in customers' houses. On the residential side, we're in your home. We want to get in, get out, cause as little disruption as possible. And having all the right materials and having the project manager coordinate everything enables us to do that. So
yeah, and it almost sounds like in order to do these luxury home builds, which I'm sure many of your, kind of clients are in that realm, or even the commercial side of things, it almost seems like a necessity at that point. And I would almost even ask the follow-up question of, do you think that people should ask the question of if there's somebody who's actually a project manager when they're looking for a quote or when they're looking for what they're going to be getting?
Yeah, I think we might have missed that on the questions to ask, right? So 100%, am I going to have a project manager? Who's going to schedule things? Who am I talking to? Hopefully, again, you don't want to go hire a company to do this for you, and you're basically GCing it yourself, right? So we're trying to take that off of your plate. And even asking a question like, do you hold inventory so that when my project's ready to start, you're ready to go? Because as we've all seen, there's disruptions with things like COVID or tariffs, and all of a sudden you can't get projectors. And now I'm going to be waiting for projectors to ship across the ocean, right? So do you have the inventory in-house to do my work? Could you start next week if I needed to, right? Those are really important questions.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think you guys in every single question give such important attention to detail, which I think is really, really helpful for anyone listening or reading or any of the information that gets put out from these. That was really all my questions for today. I think that this has been really great. And again, I think this has been awesome. If there's anything else that you guys want to add, go for it. But other than that, I think we're good here.
We're good to go. Thanks, Stephen.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you guys.